And we're back. So this is part 2 of the video. Don't try and get through this one without going first through part 1, unless you've already done this. So here we go, part 2, wireless controllers. Alright, so I went up there and connected my APs to my switch, but as you may recall, they're in regular ports. So I have to go back into my switch and add the ports that the APs are connected to the same management VLAN. So let's do that. Remember that I only had port 10 in VLAN 10, so I'm going to go ahead and do a little funky command here. And I'm going to add a whole bunch of ports. And actually, I don't even need to do that. Okay. So I'm going to do this because right now they're sitting in VLAN 1. Okay, so if I do a show VLAN, we can see that all my ports are in VLAN 10. Now the controller periodically refreshes itself, but takes a little bit for the APs to figure things out. So while we're doing that, we're going to sort of review where we are. Remember that the controller is connected to the switch. I've been talking to the switch through the web interface. I started configuring my wireless LAN. I went away from the lab a little bit. I didn't do the wireless side or the security side just to make life a little faster here. I've got VLANs, I've got my DHCP scopes configured. One DHCP scope for my hosts and one for my one for the APs. So going back over here, I've got 2 scopes. Okay, this is enabled. There's one. So this is where my APs will be picked up. This is where my clients will pick up IP addresses. Here are my interfaces. I've got this dynamic interface tied to the same VLAN as my hosts come from. And I'm going over here. Now I'm under wireless LAN, and I've got this tied to a dynamic interface. We've got it enabled. We're doing some DHCP assignments and so on. So we're just sort of waiting for these APs to come up. It looks like we've got a couple of APs so far. So that looks good. Now if I go over here to wireless LAN again, what I need to do is add APs to a group and then apply my SSID to that group. So we'll call this Hartpence group. Okay, we'll add that. And I'm going to assign this group. I need at some point to tie the group to my wireless LAN and then get some APs in here. So these are the 2 APs that I just powered up. And let's expand our screen a little bit. So I'm going to take both of these 2 and add the APs to the group. All right. Now I'd like to point out here that at no time have I consoled to an AP. You'll never have to do that. You'll never need to console to an AP. I'm just in the controller and I'm just in the switch. That's it. Because the APs, remember, are talking to the controller via CAP, WAP, or LWAPP, depending on what kind of gear you're sitting on. Okay. So now we change the configuration, and as the controller just indicated, it's going to take a little while to make this happen because we got to change the config. Okay. And we're just waiting. All right. Okay, guys. So things seem to be moving along pretty well here. So let's go over things just a little bit. So here's my summary page for the controller. We can see that I've got a couple of APs connected here. Under the wireless LAN, I created this AP group. Okay. And so now what I'm going to do is add my wireless LAN to the group. So the APs came up. They got IP addresses. I'll show you that here in a second. Here is the SSID that or the wireless LAN that I'm going to use. So I like that. And of course, okay, so now at this point, my AP group and my SSID have actually been associated. And now they're active on my dynamic interface Dynabrews. So here's the APs that I added to the group. So as things progress, you can periodically check to make sure that everything is okay. Let's take a look at one other tab here. When I take a look at my wireless tab, I can see that I've got two APs live. Here's the MAC addresses of the APs, the names, and the fact that they're alive and well according to the controller. If I go back over to my controller and I take a look at my DHCP servers, under my AP scope, all right, remember that I have this configured here. Take a look at my leases, and I can see that within the scope that I created, I've got a pair of APs alive and well. And they've been alive and well for a couple of minutes now. All right, very good. So let's go back over to wireless. I haven't really told my controller what I want to do as far as the wireless goes. So under 802.11a, remember I didn't allow 802.11b, g, or n. So if I take a peek under here, oops, it's not enabled. All right, so I'm not even going to worry about BG. What I am going to do is take a look under 802.11an. It is in fact enabled. And the only other thing that I want to do here is take a look at my channels. So if I wanted to specify what channels I was going to use, so these channels should be familiar to you, I could check or uncheck these boxes and say, well, I'm going to sort of limit my guys to a couple of the lower channels. Okay. And we'll get rid of all these. Say, we don't want any of these channels. So now what I've done is told my APs not only what SSID you're going to deal with, but also the channels that you're allowed to use. Okay, and I'll go ahead and apply that. Oops. So we'll disable that for a sec. We'll apply. Yep. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and enable that. All right. So we're enabled here. I went back and changed my, oh, sugar. Let me do that again real quick, guys. So we'll shut this guy off real quick. I did that a little backwards. There we go. Apply that. All right. Whoops. What did I forget? Where'd you go? Oh, we don't want to use these guys either. We'll clean all this up. All right. So now I'm going to go back and turn the network back on. And we'll just verify that my channels are still okay. All right. So we should be good as far as this goes. I can also use the wireless tab here to check on my APs again, as I showed you earlier. All right, so let's review here. I have a wireless LAN here. Let's go ahead and I can actually delete these at any time that I want to. I'm gonna disable this other wireless LAN because I don't want this guy out here. So I'm gonna kill off this guy here. So you can see that under the admin status, I've got it actually disabled. Okay. So Hartpence group, wireless LAN, APs, everything's looking good. So we go back to my summary page. My APs are alive and well. We can see that this is indicating that I have done some changes, some modifications here. Well, it's just about time to see if I can detect my network. So I'm going to go back over to my wireless adapter here, and let's re-enable this. And let's take a look. Okay, good. Let's take a look at what wireless networks we might be able to see here. And there it is. Okay, so now if I connect to this wireless network, theoretically I ought to get an IP address on the client network. Alright, so it's coming up. Windows 7 is thinking hard. And remember that what I'm waiting on is clients to come up on this particular DHCP scope, my host scope for my clients. And hey, look at that. I've now got a new client that's picked up an IP address on this particular network. So if I go back over to my adapter here and I check my status, there it is. Okay. Well, there we have it. That is really steps 1 and 2 completed. I brought my controller up, gave it a configuration, went in and created my 2 scopes, my 2 VLANs, my 2 networks. Did I say that already? 2 VLANs, 2 networks, 2 scopes. And I have now APs that came up. And they're talking to the controller on one of the networks, and now I've got a host connected on the other network. The last piece of this puzzle and the last part of our lab is to actually sort of connect this to the rest of the world. So what I'm going to do now is take this guy here and try and connect it to the nodes that are on the controller. And we'll see how that works here in a second. Let me pause. I'll wire up some nodes. Okay, gang, let's review where we are. We have the controller set up. We have a wireless LAN set up. We have the scopes set up for our hosts and for our APs. We have clients in each one of the scopes, one set of APs and then one wireless client. And now what we're trying to do, whoops, I closed it out, is take the final step in the lab. So up to this point, the rule of thumb has been 2 VLANs, 2 scopes, 2 scopes, and 2 networks. This is the first time that we are going to use a 3rd network. So let me just blow this up a little bit here. So we're down to our topology here. We'll write at this guy our final topology. So I have the wireless host. We have the APs. We're in here. Everything's working. I just need to get this network client in there. So for this last part of the lab, I need to go back and talk to the switch a little bit. Okay? Let's see. Yep, we're right here. So, my 3rd part of this, I've got a VLAN for management. I've got a VLAN for the wireless nodes. Now I need a VLAN for the wired nodes. So what I'm going to do is handle that right now. So I'm going to do that same interface range command. Oops, or tin range. So now I'm going to do 13 to 24. And I'm going to do switch port access VLAN 30. Okay, so now I'm creating that third VLAN. And this is for my wired stuff. It has nothing to do with the controller or anything else. All that I've done is added to my topology this guy right here. Oops. All right. But I'm not done yet. If I do a show VLAN on the switch, you can see that I've got my switch divided into my management VLAN and my new wired VLAN. The wireless hosts are getting a VLAN through the AP, so you don't have to worry about that VLAN on the switch. But I have no way to talk between my wired nodes and my wireless nodes. So what I need to do now is figure out how to handle this. So I'm going to give my VLANs some IP addresses. So we're going to do this. Boy, I'll tell you what. I'm going to do IP address. And remember that I set up some IP addresses earlier on my controller. So if I go back over here to my controller real quick, we'll just take a quick peek at that. I have this dynamic VLAN that I put on the 20 net. Remember this? And then I also had a gateway of 20.254. But where is that particular IP address? How do we send this to folks? And the other thing that I did was I just created that 30 network, or the 30 VLAN. So I also have to say, well, let's go to int VLAN 30, and I need to give it an IP address of 30.0.0.254. Now these are just addresses that I picked by convention. So if you, oops, what did I do? Oops, that's not going to work. Let's try that again. There we go. All right. So if you've guessed that I put my wired host on the 30 network, you're absolutely correct. I like to keep things the same. So I've got the VLAN 30, and I tied that to IP network 30. So now, since that host is in there, what I'm going to do is ping. Okay, there he is. So that 30.1, or 30.0.0.1 is my host. This is my VLAN ID on my particular switch. There is one other thing I need to do, and that is I need to tell the switch here that, hey, listen, you're a multi-layer switch, let's do a little bit of routing. So let's do some IP routing. All right. Now there is one other gotcha here. It's just a Cisco idiosyncrasy. I'm going to show you something. We'll try it, and we'll see if it works. I anticipate that it's probably not. So we know that the controller is handing out addresses on the 20 net. Let's go back over here. We know that the controller is handing out addresses on the 20 net. My wireless host, this guy right here, if I do an IP config, is 20.0.0.200. So I should be able to ping my gateway. But I can't. That's a problem. And the reason that it's a problem is because 20.0.0.254 isn't really alive and well anywhere. I want it to be out here on the switch. Oops. Because this is going to be how I get to the rest of the world. And even though I gave the IP address to the switch, it's not alive. And the reason that it's not alive is because the switch doesn't have a port active in that particular VLAN. So I gotta fool the switch a little bit here. This is not normally how you would do it, but since I'm just dealing with one network device, this is how we're going to get around this. So I'm going to go to int f0/13. You may remember this from my first set of configurations in this portion of the video. And instead of VLAN 30, I'm going to put it back in VLAN 20. Okay. So let's try it again. Remember, so now let me show you this first. Show VLANs. So now I've got, I'll do it again so you guys can see it. So I've got my management VLAN right here. I've got my wireless VLAN right here, although there's nobody actually connected directly to the switch, and then I've got my wired VLAN 30. So let's try that again. And all of a sudden my VLAN is alive. So now, since I have a host out there, let's try and ping the other side. This is actually an address that's also on the switch. Now let's try that wired host out there. Huzzah and ta-da. There we have it. So now if I take a look at my switch routing table, because now I'm doing IP routing on the switch, there's my two networks. Notice that the management VLAN is not there. I don't want to route to the management VLAN. I don't want host to get to it. So let's recall what we've done here. From the lab report, we can see that I've got a wireless network node here. This guy happens to be 20.0.0.200. It goes out to the switch. The switch has an IP address of 20.0.0.254. The switch also has an IP address of 30.0.0.254, and here's my network client of 30.0.0.1. This works. The reason that it works is because I set all that stuff up in my controller. Okay? I've got access points live. I've got clients on my access points. So just to go over this real quick again, I created a dynamic interface. I tied this with the network that I want to use for my hosts. I created two DHCP scopes, and they are giving out addresses. I created a wireless LAN. The wireless LAN is tied to an SSID and a dynamic interface. I am forcing DHCP addresses. The DHCP addresses for those clients are coming from my controller. I created an AP group. I added my APs to it, and I tied the AP group to a wireless LAN SSID, and then added APs to the group. And once I had all that together, the APs came up. They got IP addresses from my controller. They were talking to the controller via CAPWAP or LWAPP. They were told that they were running on particular channels and that they were going to give out IP addresses to wireless nodes connected to that SSID. On the switch, I ran a trunk up to the controller to allow the VLANs to flow, and then I got routing running on my switch. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you set up this full routed topology with your controllers and your APs, your scopes. So into the very last step, you're doing 222. 2 VLANs, 2 scopes, and 2 IP networks. You tie your APs to your wireless LAN, And then only at the very end do you go to that third network. Well, that'll about do it, guys, for the... Well, my goodness, how about that? We are done. That was quite a configuration, but if you manage to get through that one, you really have your hands wrapped around networking and are going to be off to a fine start. We had VLANs, we had trunks, we had controllers, we had wired nodes, we had wireless nodes. They were routing between each other, and you did it. Well done. So, thanks very much for watching, thanks for listening, and hey, this is networking. You can do this.